Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar From Risks to Revenue: How Website Security and Compliance Influence Business Success. We're going to be covering a lot of fun stuff today, including a whole bunch of acronyms like HIPAA, AI, ADA, as well as security risks and monitoring. If you like this webinar, go ahead and subscribe to our channel or reach out to us afterwards. We'll include you in future webinars. We do one per quarter on any subject that is near and dear to our heart. So, if you are concerned about your security positioning or wondering if you're in a good place with compliance, you're in the right place. We have some cool offerings throughout the webinar and an offer at the end of the webinar, so stick through to the end, but let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's get into it. So, this is the From Risk to Revenue webinar. We're going to talk about website security and website compliance, how they overlap with one another, but also are distinctly different. First, who am I? Why should you listen to me? My name is Cassia Franks. I'm the digital marketing director at First Call. I have 13 years of experience in web development and web security. I currently monitor and manage over 60 websites throughout the US. I work with highly regulated industries like healthcare, financial, and manufacturing. And over the years, I have worked through many breaches, hacks, and vulnerabilities to help find better ways and create preventative systems. So, have my fingers dabbling in regulation and compliance and security for many years, and I hope that my insights will bring value to your business. So, let's go ahead and get into it. So, why are you here is the question. Well, because no one is safe. So, 94% of small businesses experienced a cyber attack in 2024. 78% fear a breach could put them out of business. And the reality is that most of those who do experience a breach, 60%, will close within 6 months of that cybersecurity incident. And part of the reasoning is that the ransomware or whatever they're asking for is really high cost. So a lot of business owners know they need to have some sort of protective measures in place, but they're not really sure where to start. Aside from the risks of cybersecurity, there's also compliance regulations that business owners need to be mindful of. In the healthcare community, for example, HIPAA does cross over into website maintenance because you are collecting things like PHI on your website, or potentially. And so you do need to be aware of the risks involved, which include really heavy penalties and also loss of, trust with your clients if you're not handling their data effectively. ADA compliance is another aspect of compliance that may encompass a lot of industries. Lawsuits can range dramatically, and it's a pretty manageable thing to accommodate. So, there's over 4,000 ADA website lawsuits filed annually in the US, and the cost between legal fees and settlement can be pretty substantial, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. So it's something to bear in mind as far as the impact of that could be ending for a small business. Why are risks higher as far as the security standpoint? Well, we can blame AI partially for that. Whereas a lot of attacks previously were done manually or maybe with some sort of automation, AI is making the vulnerabilities much more apparent. So it can not only find vulnerabilities with your website a lot faster, but it can also build pages, such as phishing pages, or automate the hack so that it goes much faster so they can get into your site. And bots are now scanning the internet continuously. So they are constantly looking for those gaps in your security. And whereas before a vulnerability could take days to be exploited, now AI can exploit that vulnerability within hours. All right, to clarify something, compliance and security are similar, but there are different aspects to it. So compliance is typically regulatory requirements that include design, functionality, and security. Security is safety systems, processes, tools that store data securely, prevent breaches, and create fail-safes. A lot of overlap, but they are different from one another. So let's start by talking about security. Effective security should not be reactive. It is proactive. It should include clear ownership, direction, systems, tools, and management. And you need to have a good plan in place that is a proactive approach in order to maintain that trust with your clients and also, prevent all the work in trying to amend a hack. So you may be thinking, I'm a small business. Why would anyone want my website? Well, They use your website for a variety of reasons. Some of the more common ones that we see is that they want to send emails pretending to be you. They do that through your website if you have a form installed. A lot of websites have a form installed, and so they can send emails using their @domain. So if they get access to your site, they can get access to your data, to your contact list, to credit card processing information. They can install malicious software. They can create spam pages. There's a variety of things that they may do to benefit themselves, and some of them are not super obvious, which we'll get into in a minute. But the thing is that they actually like small businesses because they know that you don't have as robust of cybersecurity measures protecting your site. So this is a mini case study. This is an actual hack that we helped amend with a prospect. So what happened? This site began showing this pop-up that you see on the right. And the prompt was to collect payment information and get a discount because they've migrated to Web3 payments. What was the risk? Well, this is entirely made up. It's phishing, malicious, and damaging to the organization's reputation. This was up for a short period of time. We went in and assessed where the vulnerability occurred. It came through a user login that had become compromised. A bad actor logged into their site, installed a plugin that had a similar name to a permitted plugin, and that plugin prompted the pop-up to create and collect payment information. So this is an example of a website hack that's very visible. You can see this pop-up occur on the site and you have questions. Not all of them are that obvious. The most common reason that websites get hacked includes outdated anything. So that includes software, WordPress, plugins, themes. Keeping these up to date is one of the most important things you can do. Aside from that, weak passwords or having numerous people with admin access where their username is tied to their email, this can create issues as well. Unprotected forms is another vulnerability. Using lower quality form collection plugins can cause risk. Your hosting, where you store the site, could create vulnerabilities. And also not encrypting your website. So SSL is the little lock you see in the upper left corner when you're looking at the URL in your browser. A lot of websites do this by default, but not having that SSL can reduce trust and also create vulnerabilities. As a business owner, you should be asking yourself some questions. This is kind of a self-audit, so we'll walk through these. You have categories of potential risk: employee training, the website management, website build, and data management. With employee training, it's important that employees who have access to your site, and this is relevant for any login that could exist, do they understand safe password sharing policies? So if they are sharing their login with someone else, are they sending it via email? Is that email encrypted? Are they commenting it to each other or writing it on a Post-it note, or how are they securing their emails? And additionally, how are they writing those passwords? Are they complex enough that they can't easily be guessed by a bot? And remember, AI bots are testing logins at a rapid rate. And so if you have a password that is easy to guess, they will find it and figure it out. With website build basics, what you need to ensure is, well, was the website built with the right form for your industry? So anytime you're collecting data, you need to be mindful that that data is being stored on your website. So in the instance of healthcare industries, if you are collecting PHI, you need to make sure that the form that is collecting that PHI is HIPAA compliant. And if you don't know, then it probably isn't, because those forms, you tend to have to pay for them because they are a unique storing capability. Additionally, with other plugins that may be on the site, do you know which ones are safe? If you have a suspicious plugin, would you know how to recognize it? Having a plugin list so that if you are casually on the back end of the site, you can check to see if there's something on there that you don't recognize and throw up a red flag. When it comes to website management, how often is someone actually looking at your website? In the case of the previous case study, there was a pop-up. Someone from that company saw the pop-up and notified us, asking us to investigate. Now, if you never look at your site, you may not notice that it's even there. So this creates a risk. Someone needs to be actively observing your website to check for these types of risks. And in addition to that, with management, are they updating things like themes, plugins, PHP, and how often are they doing that? When it comes to data management, if you are collecting information, how is that being stored and who's responsible for it? If it's contact information that's moving from your website into a CRM, does the information need to be removed from the website? This is kind of a who owns that and who's responsible for maintaining that data. Who was consulted before you built your site? So if you do have to meet strict compliance standards, it's important that you maybe consult with someone who's familiar with those compliance standards to ensure that it's built into the site, because retrofitting compliance can be very costly, and we'll get into that in a minute. And do you know what type of data is being collected? Do you have a notice to give people the option to grant permissions to collect that kind of data? So these are all important questions to ask to build those responsibilities and the management around them. So we have a more comprehensive list. This is some of the questions, and this is some of the things that you can check. This is a technical full audit list that you can download after the webinar. We'll send a notification email, and if you'd like to download it, you can just tell us, yeah, send me a copy, and it'll give you a full list. So some of these are very technical. Some of them you may know how to implement yourself, but this list will give you more insights into some other questions or other things you should be checking. So security checks you didn't know you needed. If you don't know to ask, then you don't know what you're missing out on. So it couldn't hurt to have a copy to reference for later. So another thing I'd like to highlight is the difference between website maintenance and website care. Website maintenance is just keeping the lights on. We're updating basic things like the WordPress core, fixing minor bugs. This can result in a break fix environment. If you're doing the bare minimum and you're not actively monitoring a site or protecting it through website care, then you wind up reacting to issues as they arise. So website care involves ongoing risk prevention, not just repairs. It ensures fast recovery if something goes wrong. So important to note, there is basic security measures that you can have in place, but there is a higher level of management that is available for your website. All right, another mini case study. So why web care? What the problem was with this website is that it suddenly began to receive thousands of login attempts in a single day. If you look at the image in the bottom right, I have redacted the company, just to protect them. But you can see that this failed login notification was happening every couple of minutes. And what happened was some bot was able to figure out what the email was that was associated with a legitimate login, and it was doing its best to figure out the password. Because they had already solved half of the riddle by having the username, it was a matter of time before they gained access. The good news was that we actively monitor our sites for risks, so we can approach them before they become issues. We were alerted to the attempts and we reached out to the client to take action. The solution was notifying them, and we implemented a few things. So we created a new login URL. We removed the known email address from login access. We installed a firewall, and we also limited login attempts. This is the difference. With maintenance, that wouldn't have come to anyone's attention until someone already gained access to the site. With proactive care, it is stopped before anything happens. So proactive monitoring is very important for compliance and security. Speaking of compliance, it isn't really optional. It's a legal and financial risk. So non-compliance, notices, fines, lawsuits. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Some common compliance regulations. So HIPAA, most people are familiar with that. We also have ADA, which the guidelines are the WCAG. So WCAG is not necessarily the compliance, but ADA is. Some other less common ones, CMMC does have its tentacles in website security as well. And this is more pertinent to people who are maybe in manufacturing or work in the Department of Defense. We also have PCI DSS, which is credit card processing. And some that most people are familiar with is GDPR or CCPA, which is anytime you click that cookie button, like giving them permissions to use your cookies, then you are meeting that compliance guideline. For the most part, we're going to focus on HIPAA and ADA because they're the ones that people feel the most pressure from. So another example, in this case, it was a chiropractic clinic. They hired a local web developer to help them create their website, and the site looked great. Visuals were excellent. The brand felt right. They really loved the look and feel, and they started to receive inquiries through the site almost immediately. Love it. The problem was their contact form was collecting PHI. Not intentionally, but clients were entering medical information into the how can we help section. While they did not intend for that to be an opportunity for people to convey their pain or medical issues, they were still responsible for managing that data securely and with encryption once collected. And that is not a securely encrypted form. So they could have violated HIPAA by having this data stored on their website without encryption and transferring that data without encryption. If a hacker were to get into their website, they would have access to personal medical information, and they could be fined pretty heavily for that. Healthcare sites risk HIPAA violations anytime sensitive data is exposed, and the penalties are significant. It could be thousands and thousands of dollars. So very impactful for a small healthcare organization. Some questions to ask. Some of these are somewhat similar, but they are relevant for HIPAA. With employee training, you should be implementing 2FA or multi-factor authentication to access your site. So not just their password, but also another layer of protection. You should regularly audit employee access to sensitive information. If someone doesn't need access to the site, then don't make permissions for them. And if you do, leverage role-based permissions. Not everyone needs administrative access to your site. Sometimes editor permissions will give them enough access to do what they need to do without having full visibility of everything and opening your site up to vulnerabilities. With website management, you should be checking logins or modifications. So in that previous case study, it showed the alert that we receive if we have suspicious logins or suspicious changes to the site. If you have multiple access points and you are not monitoring who's logging in and changing what, you could be opening your site up to risk. Similarly, you need to make sure that themes, plugins, PHP are being updated regularly, ideally daily, at worst monthly. If you're not updating it at all, you're putting your site at major risk. The build basics. So your website should have an SSL. You can usually purchase it through your domain, wherever your domain's registered. And you should have it automatically log out users after a short period of time. And you should know if your patient data is being stored on the site itself. Most of the time, you have a third-party integration, something that takes them off-site where it's secure. If you are not sure, you should investigate. And the most common issue we see here is that they're using an intake form that isn't HIPAA compliant. And it's doubly an issue because if you have your website hosted and you're collecting PHI, that website host needs to have a business associate agreement, so a BAA. If you don't know, you need to ask, then you probably don't have it set up correctly. If your PHI is being transferred via email or some sort of integration, it needs to be encrypted. It has to have password. You have to type a password in to access it. That's the only way you're going to be within compliance standards. All right, accessibility. This is when we get into ADA. The risk here, you need to meet the WCAG level, is demand letters, threatening lawsuits, legal defense costs, forced website rewrites. So high risk as far as investment of time, energy, and lawyer fees. Some questions you should ask is, and these are a little technical, but has someone reviewed your metadata to check for technical elements like alt text for images? Metadata is written in the background. It's not typically visible, but you can see it sometimes if you hover over an image or if you right click on an image, you can see what they call it. And the important thing to note is this is something that people with low vision or that are blind use to navigate websites. using e-readers. So it will pull that alt tag from the image and read it aloud so that they know what the image is. Was your site built using layered semantic tags? So this is actually very important both for ADA compliance, but also for SEO purposes. Semantic tags are something that is used typically to define how big is the font. That's how most web designers use them. They say, I want this to be an H1, so it's the biggest text on the page. And how they're actually supposed to serve is like a chapter title, like a book. So H1 is the book, H2 is a chapter, H3 is a subheading within that chapter. Again, this goes into how are e-readers navigating your site. Similarly, if you're using forms, the form labels should be clear so that they can use some sort of support to enter the information. And if you have videos on your site, you should be using captions. As far as user experience goes, you should make sure your site has high contrast. So this is how distinct does text stand out on the page? How brightly colored are buttons? And is there adequate spacing between elements to allow for people with lower vision to click effectively? And if you're using anything that is image only, you want to have something called an ARIA label. Again, this is to help them read and decide what it is that's being defined on the page. And like links, if you have a read more link, it doesn't really say where they're going to go if they click on that link. So make your links more defined as far as what the destination is if they decide to move into it. An ADA lawsuit could range between $20,000 to $100,000. And it's important to note that retrofitting accessibility can sometimes cost significantly more than just building it from the start. So retrofitting can be complicated and costly. You should consult someone early on into your ADA compliance or plan it into your web rebuild down the line. All right, this is forward thinking, but something to bear in mind. AI is becoming more pertinent and they want to regulate how it's utilized and how that is communicated to people on your website. You should be prepared to add statements to your privacy policy and your cookie collection and those types of things stating whether or not you're using AI throughout the site. So an important thing to note is AI interactions such as your AI generated chatbot or any automations, it should be clear to the user if those are AI generated. If you've implemented any AI based platform into your website, you should be running risk assessments on how it's pulling data and ensuring that it's not gaining access to anything that it shouldn't be seeing. If you have used AI to generate your content or your conversations, it should be labeled as such. And potentially down the line, there should be options for request human review. And if you are using AI, if you're training it on any data, you should ensure that you have a good policy in place. If you're curious about this, on the IT side of First Call, we do have AI implementation as an offering that we help businesses implement AI securely, safely, and with a strong coordinated workflow on how it can integrate with their business. So you can get ahead of the competition as far as doing this effectively. All right, so let's look at another example of a security risk. A lack of proactive observation led this site to obtain numerous spam links. So they hid spam links throughout the site, linking to other websites so they could steal their domain authority. This hacker managed to get into the site via a vulnerable plugin. So they didn't get in through an existing user. What they accessed was a plugin that wasn't up to date, so they were able to patch in and gain access. They created multiple logins for themselves. So you can see on the left or on the right side here, we have the pro dev and we have the Jehando. So they did this as a failsafe in case one of the accounts was deleted, they still had another login. They installed a fake plugin on the site. We can see it here. It's called D3F4CR It's stood out quite a bit because it says that Zombie was here, which is pretty funny. They created a lot of fake pages and they loaded those pages with links to other sites in order to steal their domain authority. So what did the business owner see? Nothing. These pages, they didn't show up on the front of the site. They didn't override anything within the site, and they didn't leverage any ransomware. Their only goal was to use this site to bolster their spam site. What this business owner saw was a drop in their SEO. So they were doing really well. They had strong domain authority, good reputation, and they started to see that decline. So when we were just doing an SEO audit for them, we found that their site had been maliciously attacked and used as a spam site, and Google flagged them, and that is why they saw the drop. So, as I said, security risks are not always visual. Sometimes you see the results of them, but not the visual identifiers that you see on the front of the site, like a pop-up. So, from risk to revenue, how compliance and security increase trust and improve experience. Compliant means trust. Buyers are becoming very sensitive to the risks they take by collaborating with certain businesses. And compliant websites and organizations just means you get better, longer contracts. They naturally will have more trust in your organization because you put compliance and security as a top priority. There's also a lot of SEO benefits. Search engine optimization, if you're unfamiliar with the phrase. ADA compliant sites already are covering a lot of SEO standards. User experience is one of Google's most important criteria, as well as AI search. Proper heading structures, those semantic tags I was talking about, that is an essential foundational SEO structure. Alt text, clear navigation, check, check, check. These are all good SEO fundamentals. It's also important to note that 15 to 20% of all users globally have some sort of disability. So building this in means that you're making sure you're including a variety of potential users up to 1/5. All right, so let's just look at an example of how a subtle change can make a site more ADA compliant and also influence the design. So on the left-hand side here, we have not very good contrast. You can see the nature boundless potential is a light font over a light background, and the background's a little bit busy. And the button doesn't really stand out that much as well. Applying a very subtle overlay just to darken it a little bit has brightened the contrast and made the text more legible. And we also darkened the button a little bit just to help it stand out from the background. So this is an example of you don't have to renovate everything, but you just have to make some adjustments to make sure it's more visual and stands out a little bit more as far as contrast. Here's one we see very often. On the left, you can see that the text is overlaid over the image, and it creates a difficulty in reading. You can't really determine what it says, especially when you get down to the cabin. The overlay becomes indistinguishable from the rest of the image. And on the right side, you can see that it becomes a lot cleaner, clearer, and just more aesthetically pleasing, but also you have much higher contrast when it comes to having a black or a dark font on a white background. And also it makes that image stand out a lot more. So what does a good care plan include? Good care plan includes a lot of proactive management, proactive security, automated backups, update management, activity logs, disaster recovery planning, monthly reports. There's a lot involved in this if you have somebody who's got a system in place for proactive management. If you do not have that with your current setup, then it may be good to explore what are the top priority elements for you. As I mentioned before, outdated plugins are one of the most common issues that we see with vulnerability, aside from just bad passwords. So having somebody monitoring and managing your plugins, themes, and just taking a look at the site can be very beneficial as far as just getting some proactive measures in place to protect your site. An example security plan includes establishing foundational security. You can install auto update for plugins and themes, install security monitoring plugin, have hosting or site record daily backups, ensure two-factor authentication is applied, run monthly checks of your PHP and WordPress updates, and ensure the site is stored on a dual server. This is foundational stuff when it comes to security. As far as ongoing maintenance, though, eyes on security. So who's monitoring for failures? Who's monitoring for security alerts? Who is doing security vulnerability reviews or running monthly or quarterly audits of user access? If you're offboarding employees, you should be removing their access from your website. Running monthly checks of PHP and WordPress updates. Another thing here is to remove or replace outdated themes or plugins. It's really important to note when a theme is no longer going to be functioning because overhauling a theme replacement can mean a full site rebuild. Themes define a lot of the visual aesthetics of your site and they are not easy to replace. So, being aware of if a site is being sunsetted as far as management from the developer is really important to note so that you can react proactively to plan a web rebuild ahead of time rather than having your site as vulnerable. Compliance, in the same way, it's really important to start compliance by developing a brand that aligns with your compliance and audience goals. So, if you are a healthcare facility like a dental office and you know you need to be HIPAA compliant, you know you need to be ADA compliant, build your brand to have high contrast, have clear navigation, have a lot of these defining elements that pop out from the page, including your button styles. Do that before you build the site to ensure that it is aligned with compliance standards. And as you're building your site as well, you can build technical and structural compliance into the design and functionality of the site itself. You also want to include compliance policy language and clear points of contact if someone does experience an access issue. As far as ongoing compliance care, you want to test and run functional checks on the site for compliance. You also want to run at least monthly or quarterly reviews of any compliance updates. So if HIPAA changes a policy or an expectation, you want to know if that's coming down the line so that you can make sure you stay compliant. You want to schedule testing at least annually or biannually for functionality. One of the things that we do at First Call is we schedule recordings of the site. So we have a way to record how people are interacting with the page. And this allows us to look at where friction exists, where people may be experiencing issues using the site itself. And it really helps us to improve user functionality. What is the cost of doing nothing? Well, immediate is maybe nothing. Maybe nothing will happen. Or maybe something has happened and you don't know about it until you see the symptoms, such as seeing your SEO plummet or starting to get calls from clients saying that you requested payment information and they don't know why. In those worst case scenarios, you could be reacting to an incident instead of doing proactive planning to prevent it. And the hidden costs of that include that SEO loss, but even worse, it could be losing contracts or facing lawsuits. Long-term costs, lost contracts, and compliance flags. So proactive means you get ahead of the game. You probably save a lot more money than you would be spending down the line if you're facing a lawsuit or a compliance flag. All right, so I said that there was going to be a special offer, and here it is. We are offering a free web security and compliance check for those who have attended the webinar. We do have a limited number of these audits that we can do. So if you are interested, I would recommend securing your spot as soon as you can. What this compliance check and security check includes is just a quick evaluation of your website to look at security gaps, look at compliance gaps, and provide you with some clear action items. So you'll walk away knowing some of the things that you can change or implement that we would list as priority if you were our client. So if you'd like to secure your spot, we're going to send a follow-up email after this webinar to everybody who enrolled. And you can reply to that email or sign up using the form we're going to send, and you'll be able to book time to do that security check. And so it can be really beneficial for your business. All right. Well, I do appreciate everybody sitting through this webinar and learning more about compliance, learning more about security, how it can influence your business, and how it may be able to actually increase your revenue. If you're interested in connecting with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn/Cassia-Franks. My email is cfranks@firstsolution.com. What you can expect after this webinar is a follow-up from our team with an option to book time. You can also download that checklist that I mentioned. Just let us know if you'd like a copy, or we'll be able to send you a landing page where you can fill out your information and download it from there. I really hope to see you at our next webinar. If you are interested in staying on our webinar announcement list, just let us know and we can keep you in the loop. We do a webinar a quarter and we spend a lot of time researching the topics. If there is something that you would really love to see as our next topic, go ahead and comment it right now. or, send it in a follow-up email and we will look into it. We love ideas from our clients and prospects and anybody that has a concern on their heart that we may be able to provide insight for. And while you're here on our channel, go ahead and like and subscribe for a lot of videos we put out regularly related to security compliance, web design, branding, all the fun things that we work on in our day-to-day lives. So appreciate your time and hope to see you soon.